Okay.
Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem. So here you can see the chart that I've shared with you now. Let me just give a quick recap, a very fast one, a summary of last week's class and what we said. So the Mishnah, which we'll see together in a few moments, the first Mishnah in the Pirkei Avot stated that the geographical place where the Torah was given, that's the first thing, in Sinai. And it specifically enumerated those sages from Moses to the men of the Great Assembly. We then said that there can be two reasons why the Mishnah does so, and it states precisely those great sages. First, it gives the reader a short and concise order of the Torah transmission. Secondly, it is excluding some sages or leaders of past generation, although of great stature, yet they were not part of the transmission of the Torah. So it could be they were great men, but they're not part of that transmission or chain of transmission of the Torah. We see that it is quite clear that the Torah, when it says Moshe received the Torah from Sinai, so the word Torah that's used in the Mishnah, that is referred in this Mishnah, is the oral Torah. This is by the mere fact that the text says clearly that Moshe received the Torah, then to the men of Great Assembly. In other words, I'm saying that it's not talking about the written Torah, but the oral Torah. They said three things, etc. Those three things are no doubt part of the oral Torah. A simpler answer is that if the Mishnah was referring to the written Torah, it would not use the term umasra, meaning transmission, which is the term used for oral Torah, right? Because the written Torah was written down. It's not part of a transmission. It's not part of orally transmitting it from generation to generation. So therefore, we're talking about. Now, why is the chain of transmission introduced here and not at the beginning of the Mishnah? That was a question we raised last week. This is to teach us that the moral and ethic cited here are also part of the Torah given at Sinai. So this is just a quick summary of last week's class. Now, so just to go back, if you look at the screen here, I think it could put some order in a little bit of the historical background. So we spoke about Ezra, we spoke about Nehemiah. Nehemiah and Ezra came from the Babylonian exile and they came up to Israel. Ezra, if you could see, passes away in the year 3448. Right? He was, just to recap, Ezra is the great leader that comes from Babylon, and he is known as the greatest leader of the men of the Great Assembly. Ezra passes away 3448 Jewish calendar, which is 313 BCE. Yeah? Sorry, let me just turn this up. Okay, and then we reach Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik is basically the last one of the great men of assembly. So he's 3448. There's a lot of interesting events that are brought down in the text about Shimon HaTzadik. So basically, with the death of Ezra, it's basically the end of the era of the prophets. So with the passing of the last prophets, a glorious era come to an end for the Jewish people, right? Because no longer would a human will be able to say, so says God. That doesn't exist anymore. When the prophets spoke, they always said, God said to me, so says God. That era ends right there in 3448, 313 years BCE, with the beginning of the era of Shimon HaTzadik. Now, the great spiritual inspiration gained through contact with the prophet and the absolute knowledge of one's divinely ordained mission in life on both personal and national levels, as communicated directly by God's chosen messenger, was no more, unfortunately, as the era of the prophets end. However, there was no break in the flow of Torah transmission, for the era of prophecy blended smoothly into the era of the Tanaim, the sages of the Mishnah. The sages of the Mishnah that received the tradition from their teacher and the last prophets, etc. Now, there is a differences of opinion of whether Shimon HaTzadik was actually part of the Tanaim. And I will explain, because this is still very important for us to know, because we could appreciate the teaching of these great sages when we understand also the historical context. So Shimon HaTzadik, Tanaim, Tana spelled in Hebrew Taf Nun Aleph, but in English T-A-N-A, Tana is referred to the sages of the Mishnah. The sages of the Mishnah are much later. If I'll scroll down here, and you'll see. So we go through. Let me go back. Kingdom of Judah, the dynasty of the Hashmonaim, as you know, the whole story of Chanukah, right? And then we go into Roman client and kings and rulers, mostly known as King Herodus. And then we go into Talmudic era, the Mishnah. So we're talking about 74 common era, right? 38, 34 in Jewish. This is approximately the Mishnah generation. This is where the era of the Mishnah. So we can see that there's still from Shimon HaTzadik, if we go back until 74, secular year, there's over 300 years. So there's a great discussion whether Shimon was actually part of those sages that were considered the Tanaim, the sages of the Mishnah, because Shimon HaTzadik was much earlier in the years. If I would go back to him, he's right here. Okay, so okay. In any case, whether he was part of the Tanaim or not, that's an historical discussion among many Jewish historians. We'll continue with. So he receives. What's great about Shimon is that he receives this transmission of the Torah from the prophets. That although prophecy no longer exists, God compensates the Jewish people by granting the Tanaim extraordinary insight and depth of understanding in all areas of Torah, and by inspiring the Tanaim to crystallize and systematize the corpus of Torah law into a written Mishnah, right? Because again, remember people, there's no prints, there's no books, there's nothing. There's, at the most, we have a Sefer Torah and a scroll, and that's it. Nothing is printed. So finally, this generation of the Tanaim are putting things down on paper and transmitting the oral Torah now as a written Torah. Yet the Tanaim only built on the knowledge of their predecessors. This is a very, very important fact. If we could say this fact can be compared to like Einstein's discovery of the theory of relativity, right? Although many books have been written on the subject and new implications of the theory are still being discovered, they are all based on Einstein's original work. Now, we could say the same thing, if you want to use this analogy, the same true is about the Mishnah. In 3448, the Jewish people entered a time of great turbulence. And this is why this is underlined here, 3448, the year that Ezra passes away. both in spiritual and material realms. Prophecy, as we mentioned, is no longer there. Shimon is also a Kohen. He's the great Kohen. He's the Kohen Gadol. And he's probably one of the greatest leaders of the Jewish people up until this time. Okay? This is really an introduction of the historical introduction of Shimon HaTzadik and the era that he lived. I think we're gonna learn some fascinating thing about him as we go along. Let me just share with you now the Mishnah. Let's see what Shimon is teaching us. This great man, Shimon HaTzadik. We're right here. So I'll read it in Hebrew. First of all, does anybody have a question on what I just introduced in the historical, at least the historical part? Anything needs some clarity? Are we good? Okay. If we're good, I'll continue. So anybody wants to read it even in Hebrew, it'll be my pleasure. And then somebody can read it in English. If not, I'll read it in Hebrew. Okay. שמעון הצדיק היה משערי כנסת הגדולה. הוא היה אומר, על שלושה דברים העולם עומד, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות החסידים. Can somebody do the honors for us in English? Please.
I could read in English if you want.
Yes, please.
But you went up a little bit. Can you get it down?
Can you see it now?
No, yeah. Shimon the righteous, is that it?
Yes.
That's the one.
Shimon the righteous was one of the last of the men of the great assembly. He used to say, the world stands upon three things, the Torah, the temple service, and the practice of acts of piety.
Yes, perfect. Okay. Now, I have a lot of things to say, but let me ask you a question. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? I remember as the first time reading this Mishnah as a young man, or as a young boy, I don't remember exactly when, there's one thing that kind of jumps off from the text, or like, is there anything that not bothers you, but kind of makes you think a little bit when you look at this text?
It reminds me of the Rebbe's words, Gemilut Chasadim.
Gemilut Chasadim. Okay, the practice of acts of, right. Okay, so for me, I guess, unless somebody wants to say something, David, did you want to? No, I thought you go ahead. Let me unmute you.
I think the Rebbe talks about acts of kindness.
Yeah.
But I think I think here it's referring to more acts of sort of religious following, or to show that that you are religious, that you believe in your religion. I think, I'm not sure.
Okay,
which
no, that
could also mean acts of kindness too, of course.
That's good. That's where we're discussing about this. Let's see. I remember as the first time reading this Mishnah, this word tzaddik kind of, I wouldn't say bothered me, but I was like, who is this man? Shimon HaTzadik. There are very few people and in the whole Jewish, that have this appellation of being called a tzaddik. There are not many people, even in a Jewish text, that are called tzaddik, as a pious person or a righteous person. So first of all, why is this Shimon HaTzadik? I mean, before we learned about Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe was a great man. Come on. He was probably the greatest leader in the Jewish people. Joshua, none of them are called tzaddik. So the first thing is like, why is he called a tzaddik? What made him why was he called a righteous person? So let's look back in some of the texts, and I'll share with you a few words about the greatness of Shimon HaTzadik. First of all, Shimon earned the title HaTzadik, the righteous, for his great piety. which was evident throughout the 40 years he served as a Kohen Gadol. He was a very pious person. He was the high priest in the Second Temple. The Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, relates in Tractate Yoma that during the entire period that he served as a Kohen Gadol, crimson-colored strap which was tied between the horns of the Balak and the Yom Kippur would become white. So just to put it into context, when Yom Kippur, at the time of the temple, there were two korbanot, two sacrifices that were offered. One of them would be brought on the altar, and the other one would be La'azazel, right? And they would put a strap, a red strap on one of the horns, and that strap would turn, I guess, miraculously into white. What did that it signified that Hashem has forgiven the sins of Klal Yisrael, of the Jewish people. Also, during all of the years he served in the Bet HaMikdash, Daner Ma'aravi. This is maybe reminds us a little bit of the story of Hanukkah, maybe. The westernmost light on the menorah and the candelabra was never extinguished, although it was put as much oil as the others, and it was the first to be kindled. This miracle was taken as a sign that the divine presence dwells in Israel. So I guess with all these different miracles that were performed by or in honor of or in merit of Shimon, this great sage Shimon, he got the name of Shimon HaTzadik. I want to share with you also one other story with Shimon. Shimon HaTzadik was in 3448, right? Remember this date. 3448 is the year that Alexander the Great came. This is 313 BCE. Alexander the Great came into the land of Israel. The era of the Persian Empire ceased, and this is when Alexander the Great comes into the land of Israel. So the Gemara relates that when Alexander the Macedonian came to destroy the Bet HaMikdash, this was upon the request of the Kutim. The Kutim were one of the, I guess, the fighters or the enemies of the Jewish people in those times. Shimon HaTzadik robed himself in the priestly garments and went out to meet him. Imagine this great sage, this great Kohen Gadol goes out to meet Alexander the Great when he's coming to destroy the land, to destroy basically Judah. When he saw Shimon HaTzadik, it says, he descended from his carriage and bowed down before him. The Kutians said, how can a great king like yourself bow down before this Jew? He answered, look at this answer, folks. An image in the likeness of this man gains victory before me on all of my battlefields. Every time Alexander the Great, as he goes to conquer basically the whole world at that time, he sees an image of the Kohen Gadol robed in his garments of the Yom Kippur. So that we see already the greatness of Shimon HaTzadik just by these great anecdotes that are brought down in the Talmud. There's another one, and I'll share with you one last anecdote that this is a great one. It says that when that year he passed away, 3488, he foretold that he would die. And upon asking him, how did he know that he was going to die that year? So he says, every Yom Kippur, an old man dressed in white would join me entering the Kodesh HaKodashim. Every year, the Holies of Holies, and leaving with me. Yeah, he left with him. Today, I was met by an old man dressed in black, who entered but did not exit with me. 7 days later, on Sukkot, he passed away. So I guess Shimon, with all these beautiful little anecdotes and stories about him, this is where he got his name as Shimon HaTzadik, the pious, the righteous. Okay, so let's go back to our Mishnah. After we understand the word Atzadik, the righteous. Now, the Mishnah says three things, that the world stands on three things. There are two interpretations of this statement, that the world could not, one of them would, that the world cannot stand without these three things. The first is that it means that the world literally could not exist without these things. These three things are the three legs upon which the world rests. Right? Is that how you understand it? Is that how you, when you read the Mishnah, how did you understand Al Shlosha Dvarim Ha'olam Omed? Is that how you understood it? Albert?
Those that at that time, those are the main things that Am Yisrael looked for, was Torah and the temple service, which was Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. This was basically the livelihood of Am Yisrael at the time. One could argue the fact that perhaps things have changed nowadays. There's other things that people take into consideration, but maybe in those days, those were the main things that people looked at.
Oh, wow. We're going to get into a nice debate.
Argument.
That.
I
like that. So, no, I like the fact that you're bringing this up, because I actually found something very interesting that discusses this point. So you're basically saying Albert, I'll reiterate what you said just to make sure I understood it. You're basically saying that this teaching that is brought down in the Mishnah in the name of Shimon HaTzadik was for that era. In other words, it's a teaching for the era of the Mishnah and not to our era? Is that what you're saying?
No, it is definitely applicable to our era, but in our era today, there are other criteria that come into play. People are concerned about their jobs, people are concerned about their well-being, and in addition to those three things.
Well, if I may say, I think people had those same problems back in those days.
Yes, to a certain extent, yes.
But
we can't say today. But today we can't just say that the whole world stands on just Torah, temple service, and practice of Gemilut Chasadim. First of all, we don't have temple service. We have synagogues, but we don't have the Beit HaMikdash. So that's already out, right? Torah, we have Torah, and Gemilut Chasadim, we have Gemilut Chasadim. But I'm surprised that this pasuk here doesn't add health and well-being and parnasah, and because as you rightly said, Rabbi, those things did matter at the time as well. But yet they're not mentioned in this pasuk.
So I'm very happy you bring this up. Let's see what Henri has to say, and then I'll get into.
So thank you. So I'm just wondering if, Albert, you think that the Jewish people has lost faith. We've changed, and this is why that we are towards the end of getting Mashiach. Is it the reason that we became as a nation so vulnerable?
Well, now you're opening a big can of worms here.
Well, I'm asking the question because what you're saying, I find it very true. The religion hasn't changed. It's the people that changed.
Well, the people have changed with the times. Like I said before, for example, the temple service is no longer there, right? We do have synagogues, true, but at the time, you had the Shalosh Regalim, where people had to go up to Jerusalem to the temple. We don't do that anymore. But we go to Shul on Shabbat, for example, or on holidays.
So if I may, just elaborate on something here. When we read the Mishnah, and this is, again, this is very, very fundamental when we speak about the Mishnah. We have to look very carefully of the words that the Mishnah used. So when we read it, maybe at first glance, we could come up with the interpretation that Albert proposed or Henri, but look at the word omed. I mean, when we translate anything from any language, you lose a little bit of the translation, right? But how does he translate here? Stands.
Stand.
Omed. Stands. What does that mean, stand? The word stands? So the definition of omed here is two things. One interpretation is that the world continues to exist, not on the level whether it's important or if it's less important for people or things change, whether historically or anything. Here we're talking about the world, according to the sages, the world continues to exist thanks and merit of those three things. If all of those three things would be taken away, the way the Chachamim understand it, the world would cease to exist. First interpretation. We could discuss about that in a second. Second interpretation is the reason why the world was created was for the sake of those three things. And if it wasn't for those three things, God would probably change his plan and say, I'm not creating the world. So, in other words, what Shimon HaTzadik is saying is that when God was thinking, okay, you know what? I want to create the world for whatever reason it is, but I'll give you three good reasons. One of them is Torah. The other one, Avodah. The other one, Gemilut Chasadim. If it wasn't for those three reasons, God would not create the world. This is where the word Omed comes from. Omed meaning that they only exist because of this, or the world was only created only because of this. This is what we derive from the word Omed. If it would be just simply to say that, those are the three important things, Shimon would say that. Those are the three important things that we should do in our lives. Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. But he doesn't say that. He uses a very, very essential word and a very deep word here. Omed means something stands. And if without those three things, nothing could stand. The world, as he says, only stands on those three things. And if it wasn't for those three things, the world would not exist. So when we look at the Mishnah, we have to look carefully also in the wording, in the phrases, and that in the context that the Torah is saying. So here we're not talking so much about what is important or what makes us more religious or less religious. It's more about the purpose of the world. And I don't want to open a big discussion here, but it is talking about a very discussion here. A very most fundamental question of Judaism is brought down here in real life. What is the purpose of the world? This is really what Shimon HaTzadik is saying. And again, maybe if we'll have time, we could discuss it, but I don't want to get into that theological question right away. But really what Shimon is telling is, what is the purpose of the world? What is the world based upon? In other words, what underlying objective did Hashem have in creating it? And Shimon is giving us the answer here to those questions. And this, again, I'm basing this on the fact that he uses the word Omed. Okay, so let's. So according to the rabbis, in other words, without Torah, the world could not exist. And this is what explanation that many times explain. Why is it that there are different time zones? But because the Torah has to be constantly learned. When it's night here in Montreal, in Israel, everybody's already up and they're already learning, they're praying. And without people continuing the study of Torah, God, if I would use a very strong word, would destroy the world. for the study of Torah is one of the purpose of creation. As we know, it's a very famous Rashi that he says, Bereshit, Bet Reshit, two main reasons why the world was created. One is for Torah, one is for Israel, so the Jews could accomplish. Now,
I'm sorry. Can I interject just something that I'm not sure I understood?
of course,
Okay, thank you. So I thought that the religion was freedom of choice.
yes.
We are not obligated, because if God wanted to obligate us, he would form us as rabbis.
Yeah.
So I'm confused when you say, if we wouldn't study, Hashem would destroy the world. Where is our choice?
Where is there free will?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. It's a very valid question, but you have to understand that first, so I'll just take back a little bit the words that you said. Not everybody is required to be a rabbi. God doesn't expect everybody to be rabbis or to be big Torah scholars. When we talk about learning Torah, the Gemara says very simply, if you recite Shema Israel in the morning and Shema Israel at night, you've accomplished somewhat the level of studying Torah at night and in the morning. So obviously, what is expected from men. Second of all, free choice, free will. How could I put it? I was speaking once to judge. There was a judge here in Montreal, the Supreme Court. His name is Mr. Shore. He's an old man, a very nice man. And he told me, free will within the constraints and the boundaries of the law. It's not free will. That means, we live in a democracy, right? But why do I get a ticket if I don't put on my seatbelt? Do I have free choice? Why can a cop just pull me over? Yes, so I have a free choice, but within the boundaries of the law. There's no free choice of just doing whatever I want. Free choice gives me an ability to choose between right or wrong. Not the free choice to be completely, I do whatever I want, when I please, no. It's within, and this is, I think, the same idea in Torah. So you have free choice within the framework of the law, within the halakha, within the Torah's laws. So, yes, God gave us a world, and He created this world. But you have to understand that just like if we were to create something, if we were to build something with an objective, with a reason why we're creating something. Once that reason doesn't work, we close the company, we close the business. It doesn't achieve our goal from the beginning, and therefore that whole project falls apart. I think God, and this is what Shimon HaTzadik is telling us, at least according to one of the interpretations, is God is saying the same thing. Look, I've created the world. I want the world to look in a certain way. I know people are not perfect. God doesn't expect us to be perfect. I guarantee you, He doesn't expect us to be perfect. And God doesn't look for perfection. And I could give you many examples how we see that clearly in the Bible, not in rabbinical studies, but in the Bible itself, in stories between Shaul and Adam HaRishon and David HaMelech, where God is not asking for perfection. God is asking for us to be the best we can be. There was a great sage that once said, I'm not worried that when I come up into heaven after 120 years, they'll ask me, why weren't you like your forefathers, like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? I'm afraid they're going to ask me, why weren't you, his name was Daniel. They're going to ask me, why weren't you Daniel? Why weren't you yourself? God is not expecting us to fulfill the whole Torah and to do. We as people have to strive to be a little bit better every day. Looking at ourselves and asking ourselves, how can I become today a better person and move forward? Nobody's expecting me to be Moshe Rabbeinu. Nobody's expecting me to be Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. We have to excel in where we hold and to go a little bit beyond our abilities and to make a nachat ruach for Hashem. So when God makes that plan, and his plan, he's like, I want to create the world where I have people that will practice Torah, will do acts of kindness, and will do avodah. And when we speak about the avodah, we're not necessarily, so back to what Albert is saying, when we speak about the avodah, yes, it's true, but the avodah that is referred to here, the temple service, was replaced by prayer. So today, although we don't have temple service, we do have, right, tefillah.
But to my knowledge, Rabbi, if I may interject here,
yes,
the
please.
only avodah for the temple that we do is Sefer Avodah that we read on Yom Kippur before Mincha in the afternoon. That's to my knowledge, that's the only Sefer Avodah that we do towards the Bet HaMikdash. But
we do.
Yeah.
Okay, but you're using. In other words, you're referring to the word avodah, but avodah means labor, right? Working, laboring.
No, it's serving Hashem. That's what it means here.
Yeah, service, avodah. But avodah is serving, working, laboring. This is what it means.
Yeah.
In this context, it means to serve Hashem. At the time of the temple, we served Hashem inside the temple. Now we're serving him outside of the temple. There's no temple. How do we serve God? Service means literally now is prayer, tefillah. Like we say every morning, by the way, when you speak about a service, right, Albert? When you speak about service, every morning we say something from the Bet HaMikdash. Every single morning. Lefichach, right? And then we say the korbanot, the korban tamid. And then we say the ketoret.
Ketoret also, yes.
And then we say, this is all part of the service that was done inside the Bet HaMikdash. Although physically, they would bring a korban tamid, now we say it. And at the end of the paragraph, when we say the ketoret, we say, Venishlama parim sfatenu, that the words that we have pronounced should be a replacement for the korban, should be the replacement of the offering that was brought down, that was brought at the time of the Bet HaMikdash. Now we're doing it through pronouncing and saying words of the korban. So that was replaced by our work, our service in the temple.
So if one can interpolate here, Rabbi, if I may,
Yeah, please.
if as Shimon Tzaddik says, העולם עומד על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים. The Torah exists. We can still do gemilut chasadim. We are doing avodah in a certain diluted way because the temple isn't there.
No, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Does that, now that the temple isn't there, does that mean that the world as we know it should not be existing? Even though we're doing avodah in our own way, in a sort of diluted form?
On the contrary, there's a great advantage now, although we are definitely in exile, although we pray every day that Hashem we should return to Zion and should return to Jerusalem and that the temple should be built. Yes, we do that every day. But there's even an advantage now to you and me over the time of the temple. You know what it is? You and I could actually bring a korban, at least a virtual one.
I would hope it's a virtual one.
Right? What it says. That means because you can't forget that in the time of the temple, the only person that was able to bring a korban was the Kohen. You and I mean, I'm not a Kohen. I would not be able to even set foot inside the area where the korban would be offered on the altar. I would not even be allowed to be there, even to look at it. So today, you and I say the korban, and as the famous Midrash says, The one that recites a korban, it's as if he had brought the korban himself. It's only as if. It's a virtual one. That means the spiritual realm of the korban was not taken away from us. The physical was. The physical korban could not be brought onto the altar. Yes, you're right, 100%. But the spiritual idea of what we're trying to accomplish by bringing the korban, because what is the word korban in Hebrew? C'est quoi la racine du mot? The source of the word korban, what is it? It's kuf resh bet.
Karov.
Karov. Ulitkarev. Luitkarev. Karev. Karev is to get closer. What are we trying to, in other words, what were we trying to accomplish at the time of the Bet HaMikdash by bringing a korban? To get closer to Hashem. That was the whole idea. It says in the Psukim, does Hashem really need a lamb? Does he eat? Does he need the smoke? What does he need? Why does he need a korban? He says no, because the korban, without getting into all the details of the korbanot, maybe one day we'll be able to give a class about it. But the whole idea of the korban is that the person should come close to his creator. That was the whole purpose, to come close. He comes to the temple. Imagine you would walk into the temple. It was one big barbecue. It was a Lag BaOmer every day over there. One big barbecue. You see the Kohanim, you see the Leviim, you see the great people, you would meet your friends there. Just the scene of being in Yerushalayim and standing there, you would be in a state of awe. Just by being there. You didn't have to do anything. That brought you closer to your Creator. Now,
and in that case, Rabbi, why don't we do it now? If the purpose of the korban is to get closer to Hashem,
but we're doing,
but we don't do it now because we're told that there's no Bet HaMikdash.
No, but until then, but that's why I was just about to finish. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Sorry.
No. But now the prayer, what it represents, coming into the Spanish and Portuguese and seeing your friends and being with the cantor and with the rabbi and being around this great kedusha, that's what we're trying to accomplish now. The synagogue now is compared to a mikdash me'at. It's a small Bet HaMikdash. This is what we're trying. This is what is accomplished now. Hashem told us, now I don't desire that there should be a temple at this moment, but I do desire that you congregate. I do desire that you come and serve me by praying. Serve me now, not only as the Kohen Gadol that could bring an offering, but Albert Hershkovitz, Maimon Pinto, Rose, Schwartz, Mr. Hadid, James could all serve me and get close to me by prayer. And that is his desire. When God will eventually desire to give us the third temple, we'll have the third temple. But now the desire of Hashem is this now. And so getting closer to Hashem now is accomplished through our prayers. Getting close to Hashem and bringing quote unquote offering, so to speak, to Hashem is by the tefillah and coming into the sanctuary and praying to Hashem. And by so we get closer to Hashem. Okay, so we spoke about the Torah, we spoke about the Avodah, whether the Avodah is the temple service or whether we call it today, as the Rambam says, I don't know why I didn't quote this Rambam from the beginning, where it says, Ezei Avodah Shebalev, what is a service that's in the heart? The service of the heart is the actual prayer. Now, the last one, Gmilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. Now, these are not merely acts of charity, but any act that helps another person in his time of need, visiting the sick, comforting the mourner, welcoming guests, that is all part of Gemilut Chasadim. The rabbis teach us that these acts are even greater than giving charity, right? For a person gives charity with his money, but these acts are performed with money by a person's own body. Yes? We should also know that according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, after the destruction of the temple, acts of loving kindness take the place of the temple service. And this is very interesting. That can no longer be performed. Until now, we explained that the actual prayer is taking the temple service. But according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he says, now the acts of loving and kindness, this is what has replaced the temple. Whereas in the past, a person would be atoned through sacrifices after the destruction, the way to achieve atonement was by the performance of acts of pity. Sorry, the acts of piety, I'm sorry. Okay, I wanted to share a story, but we'll see how much time we have.
We have another 7 minutes.
Yeah, let's. Okay, we basically that was the whole idea of the Mishnah here. There are something that I read very interesting that I wanted to share with you, but to get to that. I'll share with you a very interesting story that needs a little bit of background. You know that honoring your parents, right? Honoring one's parents. That is also part of the Gmilut Chasadim, right? Obviously, honoring your parents and visiting and comforting them, and you know, it's also part of acts of loving kindness, right? Now, there is a discussion whether a person has, to what extent do we have to honor our parents? Does it go to the extent also that we have to support them financially, for example? I'm talking about a very practical halacha. Do I, as a person, have the obligation or the responsibility to support my parents financially? It's a real discussion that is brought down in the Talmud and in the Shulchan Aruch. And the conclusion is that although maybe financially we cannot ask a person to support his parents, especially if he doesn't have the means, do we require him, if you don't have, you have to support your parents, you don't have it, go ask for charity and give it to your parents. That, the halacha says, obviously we can ask a person to do so. Now, but there's something that is much stronger than just giving charity, and this joins exactly what we said a minute ago. Possibly one does not have to support financially his parents, but he has to be there physically. That means that whenever they need you physically to be there, you have to be there. They need you to do shopping for them. You're honoring parents comes under that definition. So there was a story of a man that came to a great rabbi, and he told him, "Rabbi, I have to. My parents live overseas, and you know, it was many years ago. You would have to travel by boat, and you would have to get there, and to help them, it was very expensive." And he told him, "Rabbi, I don't think I could afford it. You know, do I have the obligation of spending that money in order to go visit my parents and to make sure that they're well taken care of?" So the rabbi looks at him and he thinks, and he tells him, "You don't have to spend the money for it. And if you don't have the money, you don't have to, but you have to walk there." Okay, I mean, it was probably impossible to walk there, right? Because it was very far. The guy had to take a boat. But that just gives us the intensity or the importance of honoring parents, and the Gemilut Chasadim is that, yeah, you might not be able to give money to it, but you have to use your own body in order to do this mitzvah. So he had to actually travel there by foot, and that obligation rests upon him, even though he was not able to afford it. Anyways, that was a side point that I wanted to bring out. I found it a very interesting story. I'll leave you with one thing, which was really a discussion that I wanted to have with you, but maybe we'll leave it for next time. So instead of saying the word that we saw in Shimon HaTzadik statement, that instead of saying the world stands on three things and then enumerating them, he should have just said, study Torah, serve Hashem, and do acts of kindness. What does he have to say stand, right? So we brought this up a little bit just a minute ago. And this goes back to what you were saying, Albert. There's no question that over the years, the world has progressed immensely. Technology has changed our lifestyle so drastically that previous generations appear to us like primitive. Surpassing prior accomplishment, humanity continues to progress and increase in sophistication, right? With all this progress and advancement, some claim that the Torah lifestyle should be modified to the contemporary modern age, right? Shimon HaTzadik's message is that regardless of contemporary progress, there are three things in which the world must be omed, stationary, i.e. remain the same as in previous time without being altered, modernized, or modified in the minute way. They are Torah, service of Hashem, and acts of kindness. Regarding these, the Jews of all generation must maintain their observance in accordance with the old, established, authentic ways of our rabbis of previous generations. Now, this, I'm sure we can have a long discussion about this. But what is for sure is that the Torah teaches us, especially even now in the Pirkei Avot, meaning that just like Aaron, right? Aaron, the great Kohen, the brother of Moshe, that says that we have to bring people close to the Torah. We don't bring the Torah close to people, but we bring the Torah close to them. And of course, the times we live in, modernization, things change, definitely. But if we start tampering and start changing things in the Torah, it's true that the Torah must adapt to a lot of things. Look, we're learning Torah now, like 10 years ago, even just 10 years ago, people would never think about such things. And we are presented with many challenges to Torah. But one must ask himself always, if we are to change certain things, the great question always lies, where do we draw the line? And I don't think anybody has an answer. I for sure don't have an answer to it. Because even in my life as a rabbi, that I have to adapt to people and I have to, you have to be, there's 4 parts of the Shulchan Aruch, but there's a 5th one. The 5th one is common sense. So of course we have to use common sense. We have to think, we have to rationalize, we make mistakes, but there is no time even in my short rabbinical life, I'm still a young man, I've not asked myself, Rabbi, where do you draw the line? Where is that line drawn between trying to keep in what Shimon HaTzadik is teaching us and at the same time adapting to people and being modern and contemporary in order to bring people close to Torah? That was the last last idea I wanted to share with you.